Jonathan Ross on BBC One in just over an hour with Denise Lewis, Darius and Caris Matthews. Right now, it's 9:30.
Welcome to Have I Got News For You? My name's Alexander Armstrong, and if I seem familiar to you, it's because I'm a regular on ITV. Footballers' Wives, Coronation Street, Emmerdale, you name it, I've done some adverts in the middle of it. In the news this week, in Jerusalem, as Yasser Arafat and Ariel Sharon hold urgent peace talks, there's hope for humanity as their grandchildren play together in the crash. During testing in the desert, the US military admit it was a mistake to allow the president to program the new smart missile himself. And in Los Angeles, Catherine Zeta-Jones's baby is old enough to grasp the idea that that old man is actually her father. Within Hislop is a stand-up comic and activist whose political philosophy is the worst thing anyone can do is submit to pessimism. Fat lot of good that'll do him. Mark Steele. With Paul Merton tonight is a TV doctor who appeared on Have I Got News For You a couple of years ago and is also a regular on West Country TV, so viewers may well have seen him on this programme a couple of years ago. Phil Hammond. And we start with round one. Ian and Mark, here's fun.
Well, that's Claire Short, who resigned on a matter of principle, and the principle was that she was going to be sacked.
There's an ejector seat. There's a replacement, took half an hour. This is the end of the government. It's goodbye to Blair. Or am I over-egging it a bit?
I think one of the mistakes that Claire Short made is realising that you don't have that much impact if you're attacking the Prime Minister in a Birmingham accent. Who would have remembered Churchill if he'd gone, appeasement, that's ridiculous, give it a couple of years, this Hitler will be invaded.
What did she accuse Tony Blair of, specifically?
Control freakery.
Seeking a place in history.
She accused him of ruling by diktat with a cabal of ministers. Perhaps a little bit less time watching Countdown, Claire, and a bit more time turning up for Cabinet.
She didn't turn up for a cabinet meeting, and there was an empty chair, and he went like this. That's the closest he's got to a smoking gun. That's the smoking gun.
It's sad, because I mean, she does have a point. I do find it astonishing. For a year, they were going, there are weapons of mass destruction, well, we have to have this war, we've got to have a war and weapons... And now they're there, and they go, oh, it doesn't really matter whether they're here or not, they can't find them, they're nowhere. And I think it's a bit like if the Wile E. Coyote actually caught the Roadrunner, and then went, oh, to tell you the truth, I'm not that hungry.
It was almost like a falling out with your girlfriend, wasn't it? It was almost an indecent partner swap, because she went out there, and then Lady Amos come down the stairs 5 minutes later.
I'm so sorry you're gone, Claire. Have you met Baroness Amos?
How is Amos described by the Times?
Intensely able, pushing, Blairite.
Pretty much. Quiet, urbane, fiercely loyal to Mr. Blair, gets to grips with issues quickly and does not like to make a fuss. So just about as different from Claire Short as it's possible to be about actually being John Fashanu.
Blair is very clever, isn't it? Oh dear, I've lost a woman. Here's a black woman! Marvellous.
She's representative of the country. She's black, a woman and a baroness.
I mean, I like the idea that Claire said, I was never consulted in Cabinet about things like the Foundation hospitals. And she didn't turn up to that meeting, so it's quite difficult to consult her, isn't it? What are Foundation hospitals? Can you just help us out here?
Well, basically, what... The sad thing is, I think they've realised they've screwed up the NHS and they can't actually change it, so they want to devolve responsibility, which means get the hell out of there to maybe 5 or 6 hospitals and let them run themselves.
So you're with Claire on this one?
And the one thing politicians need to do to save the health service is bugger off out of the NHS. It's quite simple. For the last 55 years have taught us anything, it's politicians shouldn't be in charge of it. They're good on slogans, you know.
The Mirror ran a whole page devoted to famous resignations. Nigel Lawson, 1989, Geoffrey Howe, 1990, and Kim Marsh leaving his...
Kim Marsh being What, the Minister for the Environment, who I met?
Right here. This is the news that Claire Short has resigned. Unless you're watching the...
Hearsay!
He's got it. In her Commons attack on Tony Blair's leadership, Claire Short advised the Prime Minister to step down soon, saying it would be very sad if he hung on and spoilt his reputation. Well, she should know. MPs were uneasy at the appointment of Baroness Amos to Claire Short's old job, pointing out to Tony Blair, as a member of the Lords, she cannot answer questions in the Commons. To which Tony replied, perfect, as he stroked his white cat. According to The Times, like many in New Labour, Baroness Amos has journeyed far from her left-wing past. Yep, I think the clue's in Baroness. On Tuesday, a cartoon in The Times drew an amusing parallel with I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, as did the Express cartoonist, the Sun cartoonist, and the Mirror's headline writers. Whilst the London Evening Standard went with this. Has anyone seen the amusing front cover of Private Eye this week?
Yeah, it was extremely funny. It was saying, I'm a liability, get me out of here. Monday night. Very amusing, and only £1.30.
The other side for you.
Right, hello, who's nicked our office? This is croquet, knocking balls through hoops. This is the Tories, aren't they? I'm going to say this again and again and again and again, and there's David Miller.
That's another croquet hoop, the gap in his teeth.
Yes. This is about the Tories went on a weekend when they started bonding. We must bond with each other. We must be with each other. We must bond, and we must have a fair deal for everybody. We won't be Conservatives anymore. Everybody will be treated equally, and that's the way it's going to be from now on. And David Miller said, well, actually, if that's what you call Conservatism, I'm quitting. And that's the answer.
They had this big thing about the BBC calling them a joke, and Ian Duncan Smith has been referred to as a whispering slaphead. Once too many by the BBC, so they kindly asked us to stop doing that.
So that thing there where they've taken no fees, now it reminds me, it shows you how far Labour have gone, because this was the crowd that said the three priorities were education, education, education. And you think, well, at least the Tories didn't have the cheek to put Esseltine on the telly when they were in the government to say, this government has three priorities, mining, mining and mining.
It's very clever, though, isn't it? It's a very clever ruse. There are going to be no tuition fees because there are going to be no students. It's very clever. It's like there's going to be no waiting lists because there will be no hospitals.
Yes, any other ideas? NHS-related ideas?
They're going to cut queues by making people stand closer together.
Yeah. Fancy idea what they're doing with the NHS, but I don't know what New Labour are doing with the NHS either, so...
New Labour just can't get out the idea that everything has to make a profit. And if you say, well, no, actually, surely the state should fund it, it doesn't have to make a profit, they go, oh, that's all a lot of old, outdated nonsense. And you think, well, hang on, just because something was written a long time ago doesn't mean it doesn't apply. If you go around for a dinner party at the Blair's house, do they just chuck the plates in the air and say, oh, don't worry about gravity, that's 300 years ago. The plates won't fall, they won't float, they'll find a third way into the dishwasher.
Where was the bonding weekend held?
Buckinghamshire.
It was, more specifically?
Latimer.
Latimer House in Buckinghamshire. Which was what during the Second World War?
Brothel.
Hitler's country retreat?
Could have ended up being that. It was a detention centre for high-ranking Germans. Like the Queen, presumably. And the Telegraph showed us what Theresa May was wearing.
There. Ah, baked me shoes.
Any idea what they did in the afternoons, according to Theresa May?
You don't want to know.
Who turned up to the weekend in a new Porsche 911?
Boris.
It was Boris. He turned up saying, I'm about to bond, it's going to be tremendous. Here's what he looked like before he got into his car.
I'm sure I've seen that shot in a porn movie.
The Tory bonding session took place at Latimer House, which in the 1940s held German prisoners of war. In the middle of the night, one MP even thought he'd seen the ghost of a long-forgotten Nazi, but it turned out to be Lord Tebbit wandering around in his night. The launch of the party's new Fair Deal strategy, Ian Duncan Smith said he was supporting the backbone of Britain, which, as any doctor will tell you, makes him an arse. Time now for the tabloid headline round. Ian and Mark, the biggest betrayal in our history.
This is Europe.
It is Europe.
This is the fact that we're going to become the United States of Europe. And I don't know which paper this is, but a number of papers have got incredibly excited. Because it's an idea put forward by the French about how they should run Europe. And it's put forward by Giscard d'Estaing, who in this country would be in jail. It's the equivalent of having Jeffrey Archer decide the future of the continent. He got involved in a scandal taking diamonds from Emperor Bokassa, that charming humanitarian who had a fridge full of human body parts. He's one of those really charming French leaders that they turn up what, sort of every time, really. The idea of being told about a constitution of Europe by d'Estaing is absolutely ludicrous. Sorry, I do sound a bit like the Daily Mail, but just occasionally they're right. We're meant to have a referendum on this, but Blair doesn't want a referendum. Perfectly good reason, he'd lose. So we're not having a referendum. We have a referendum on whether they're local council elections, whether you want a monkey in Hartlepool, really important issues, but on the fact, do you want to be ruled by a group of people in Brussels, it's not important.
You were going off on one there, weren't you?
Yeah. Sorry about that, but it's sort of irritating,
Give
really.
it another 3 minutes and it'll be f***ing Italians. You, f***ing war.
Well, I mean, that is a reasonable point, actually. It's very easy to sneer, but if you mean the Italians like Mr. Prodi, the commissioner who had to resign along with the whole of the commission on charges of corruption, it's a reasonable point about Italians. Or Mr. Berlusconi, another crook. No,
Every one of them, crooks.
No. Playing the left-wing comic and saying in the hope of getting a laugh. Awesome and irrelevant.
Can I say that was tremendously exciting watching that?
You should go on a bonding weekend.
Yeah.
I don't really bother me that much. But the,
Does it bother you, Ian? No.
I'd like to check Ian's blood pressure now, actually. That's all right.
How did the Sun crystallise the damned injustice of the situation?
Well, it's no good trying to undermine the argument by calling in the Sun.
Well, they did it rather well, actually. 81% in dark on Europe Treaty, 84% demand referendum on it. So go and work that one.
Do you know Article 14 of this thing says that we have to be loyal to the European Commission? So on the basis of the last 10 minutes, I'd be locked up in Greece on a charge of crime.
You're not supposed to clap then.
Yes, this is the debate over the new constitution for the European Union. The Sun compared Tony Blair's plans to previous threats to our sovereignty. Notice how Tony is a much bigger threat than, say, Hitler. Baroness Thatcher joined in the anti-Europe debate, giving a speech in New York, attacking the French for collaborating with the enemies of the West. She later added, "I have drunk deep from the same well of ideas as Ronald Reagan." I think maybe one drink too many, Maggie. Paul and Phil, he ain't heavy, he's my trainer.
That's a national health firm that sent out a confidential email asking various owners of the health farms not to employ people who are size 16 or over, which I think is appalling. I mean, we're very discriminatory against obese people in this country. I worked in one hospital and they used to call obese patients DTS in the notes, or danger to shipping. Extraordinarily large woman came in for a D&C for a womb scrape, and I had a gynecologist called Mr. Savage, which is irony for you, and he wasn't able to perform this, and he wrote back to the GP. He said, "I'm unable to perform this procedure without the aid of a miner's lamp and a canary." And this is just another example of fattest discriminatory policy. It's appalling. There was a piece of
You guys had to pull him, you've got 2 laughs.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. You need a fat ribbon for fat people or something. Every other disease got a ribbon. Give them a ribbon.
What colour would that be?
Is it disease being fat?
Yeah, it is.
Is it?
It's a genetic thing. You have a higher primed appetite. You can't help it. We're hunter-gatherers and we're primed to eat.
To be fair, they wouldn't catch much, though, would they?
They could sit suddenly on nocturnal animals.
What's the end of this story? Are they allowed to...
No, they're not allowed to, and they've suddenly retracted. But the trouble is that most people in this country are size 16 or over. We are a nation of alcoholic, risk-taking, smoking lard buckets. That's what the British... That's why
I'm proud of it.
Stuff, yeah.
And we refuse to be ruled by Europe.
with their salads.
And their Mediterranean diets.
Obesity pressure groups are apparently campaigning for a change in the law. Do the law of gravity.
Most of us are overweight. About 1 in 5 of us, frankly, obese, but most of us are overweight.
Unless you go to Chessington World of Adventures.
Well, what happens there?
It's about 90%.
Yes, this is the leaked email from Fitness First head office to gym managers urging them to consider the impact of having larger employees. The email caused shockwaves through the firm. "Nobody can believe it," said a senior employee choking on his donut. As soon as they heard the news, a number of staff threatened industrial action, principally in the form of a go slow and a mass waddle out. And at the end of all that, the scores have moved on to Ian and Mark 6, and Paul and Phil 6.
Oh.
The odd one out round is next. Ian and Mark, your figures of fun are Jeremy Beadle, George W. Bush, Marcello Ferrand, and the crozier of the Right Reverend Bishop, Dr. Christopher Rogerson.
The three of them are wearing blue.
But Jeremy Beadle's the odd one out. He's the only one whose hat has melted.
Connected something George Bush has done in the past couple of weeks?
Oh, yeah, they've all gone to war against Iraq.
Ah, is that lad the one that got lost in Scotland? And he went on a train thinking that it was the train that his mum had got on, and he ended up in Nottingham?
No. It's a turning off question.
They're not all dead, are they?
Marcello Ferrand was ejected from a plane.
Well, he was literally ejected or turned off.
No, well, he was turned off.
Oh, thank you. Language is quite important there. Air rage. They've all been guilty of air rage, particularly Bush. Just furious. Got on Air Force One, went for the drinks trolley, they said no, off.
Yes, they've all been banned from a plane, except President George W. Bush, who recently co-piloted a fighter plane which landed on an aircraft carrier. Marcello Ferrand had a tantrum on plane while they were taxiing and wouldn't put on his seatbelt. Beadle forgot his photo ID, so wasn't allowed onto a plane from London to Glasgow.
Did he say, do you know who I am?
Yes, that's why you're not getting on the plane.
Recounting his brush with bureaucracy to the Daily Express, Jeremy Beadle said, "I told them I had 2,000 people waiting for me in Glasgow," which is when his story lost all credibility. Bishop Rogerson was banned from taking his crozier on a flight. The fuss was eventually resolved, but things got worse when the in-flight movie started and the bloke behind him shouted, "Oi, mate, take your hat off." Paul and Phil, your objects of desire are Robert Mugabe, Kim Jong-il, Sean Lloyd, and Nico the Parrot.
There's going to be a jungle thing here, isn't it? Because Sean Lloyd was recently on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me On this programme. So is anything to do with jungles?
No.
No, OK. Sean Lloyd and Nico the Parrot have got a double act. They're singing. That's the same photograph. They're singing together. They're entering the Eurovision Song Contest, aren't they?
It's not
They do summertime and weather-related hits.
We're getting there, actually. We are getting there. It's a,
Stormy weather.
Oh, because the North Korean guy's an Elvis fan, isn't he?
No, we were there. We're now really not. What's Sean good at?
The weather.
The weather.
They're all good at the weather.
Yes!
And the parrot, yes. Scattered showers, he's learned that.
You have actually got the question right here.
So they're all weather
unwittingly.
forecasters except Kim Il-jong.
Except Kim Il-jong is the right answer, yep.
How did the parrot do it?
Do you want to do that again? You did it so well before.
Scattered showers?
There you are, yeah.
Doesn't mean he's right, though, just because he can say it.
What kind of idiot would teach a parrot to say scattered showers? The English language is rich with possibilities, and you pick scattered showers.
No, you do scattered showers brighter later. You're going to cover your bets, haven't you? Scattered showers brighter later.
Yeah.
What's Kim's favourite hobby?
Filling mongoose full of soft cheese. And if that's not the right answer, I'm a Dutchman's uncle.
Well, Uncle Hans.
Yeah?
It is actually filmmaking. It's not funny, but it's true. Famously, he did actually... Do you want to know this story about how he got a particular film made? He kidnapped the famous South Korean director, put him in prison for 5 years, fed him grass, then forced him to make a communist version of Godzilla. So...
A communist version of Godzilla? What is that? Have we got a clip of it? Let's have a look. Do you know why it doesn't exist?
No, I'm afraid...
Is it Godzilla in a top hat and the factory workers come out and pull him down?
Any idea what Kim's favourite food is? Roast donkey.
How'd you get it in the oven? What do you have with the donkey? Do you have peas? Faggots, I think. How dare you? Don't let the shirt fool you.
Sean Lloyd. Who is she?
Does she eat donkeys?
No, don't say.
Then what's she doing with him, then?
She does predict the weather for one of the channels.
She does. She does for ITV, in fact. Yes, they have all predicted the weather, except for Kim Jong-il, who, according to the North Korean news agency, controls it. Nico the Parrot even stood in briefly for BBC weatherman Paul Hudson. Imagine my despair when I came back from holiday to find there was a parrot that's more accurate at weather forecasting than me, he said, after his disappointing skiing trip to the Bahamas. Robert Mugabe has taken control of Zimbabwe's weather forecasts, forcing farmers to rely on traditional folklore, such as red sky at night, farmsteads alight. After she came out of the jungle on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, The Sun reported on Sian Lloyd's reunion with her partner. She squeezed into a pair of sexy red and black silk panties. Gives a whole new meaning to the phrase Bush Tucker Challenge. Missing Words is the final round, featuring this week's guest publication, British Homing World magazine. You may scoff, but getting hold of it was a bit of a coup. So, here we go. What helps to heal US rift with France?
Death of Chirac. Nationwide strike makes all laugh. The whole of France has given up for the day. How do you tell?
No, the answer is table football. This is an international table football tournament in Paris. During the competition, England were disqualified because they failed to field a full team, and Scotland because they refused to put 50p in the slot. Next, do you have your what tested regularly?
Pigeons.
You're in the right area. Do you have your...
Prostate.
Droppings tested regularly? This is from the British Homing World
Is that a taste
magazine.
test?
It's a report of a Q&A session with Mr. and Mrs. Harry King.
Which one's Mrs. King?
There are about 8 different lung conditions you can get from pigeons, of which psittacosis is the only one I can remember. But,
And what are the symptoms of that? If there's anybody who's watching at home who's got a pigeon in their living room, somebody who maybe at the moment smoking a pigeon, what would be the effect on their lungs?
well, it's the same symptoms as SARS, which isn't terribly reassuring. But it's trouble breathing. The SARS thing is interesting, isn't it? Because nobody's died of SARS in this country. 1,500 people have died falling down the stairs. Right? And in fact, more people are falling down the stairs now because they've got those bloody ridiculous masks on. They can't see where they're going.
Next, fresh-faced bimbos no longer monopolise what?
Church of England.
The steel industry.
It's a steel industry.
Yeah, definitely.
Not that, is it? Just not.
Oh, isn't it?
Mujahideen.
The answer is men's fantasies. This is a survey revealing that people's sexual tastes are broadening. According to the Observer's Christina O'Donnell, visit the web and you'll find an appetite for older women. Visit the web and you'll find an appetite for anything, love. Next, not all pigeon fanciers are what?
Flammable.
Intimate with their birds. Hence pigeon fancier. They dress them up as Judy Garland in Easter Parade. Put a hat on them. Make them walk up and down the coop. Northern. That's a stereotype, isn't it?
No, not all pigeon fanciers are great readers. So presumably British Homing World is purchased not so much for its articles as its absorbency. Next, what had secret talks with Mole?
Ratty.
Not that book.
Pigeon.
Not that mag.
British Army. Is it British Army?
Government.
Oh,
It was the last government.
yes, yes. The answer is Thatcher. This is the further revelations about the identity of the IRA and former steak knife. This week, Freddie Scappaticci denied he was steak knife, claiming he was the much less threatening member of the IRA, codenamed Gravy Boat. And finally, what replaces what as pigeon prize?
Matthew Kelly, Tin Cup. Matthew Kelly replaces Tin Cup as pigeon prize. You want to give it to me, but you can't.
I do. Bread maker replaces TV as pigeon prize. This is the news that...
Why would a pigeon want to make its own bread? Mind you, they do eat bread, don't they? Yeah. They don't have to scrounge off the rest of us then, they can make their own bread. That should be the content. You've got to fly to Oldham and back and produce a couple of croissants. And it can be judged by Delia Smith. What the hell am I talking about?
That brings us to the end of tonight's contest, and the final scores are as follows. Ian and Mark, 11. Paul and Phil, 7.
Oh, all right.
Oh, they're made up now by Tony and Claire. I love it.
I'm glad it had a happy ending, because I was worried for the two of them. They look so sweet together, and you hate to see them fall out.
No, the old left, they used to be anti-Europe too, so he'll come around.
What vintage old left? What?
Tony Benn, Peter Shaw, that sort of group, they were all anti-Europe.
Were they?
His vintage, really.
Yeah, but they weren't anti-Europe in the way you were saying, were they? I don't think, you know, Tony Benn never used to go, oh, bloody baguettes, they're a bloody disgrace.
No, but enough, I didn't say that, you just made that up.
Oh, no, they've started again, you see. They've started again. They were like, they were
It's
just...
all very well people coming on and saying, oh, journalists make it up, and you watch someone with the most deviously twisted argument I've seen in at least, well, 5 minutes. bloody baguettes.
That was terrible.
He said it, he said it, he said it, he said it. He said bloody
Having more
baguettes.
baguettes than you pretended to have hot pot dinners, mate.
Never go to bed on a row, that's what my granny used to say. You just...
Well early.
Never go to bed on a rhino.
Before we go, there's just time for a quick caption competition.
Is it church inflate sticker?
There must be some mistake. I ordered Charlotte Church.
Okay.
Is the man on the right saying, when they told me I was going to make a film for 20th Century Fox, I naturally thought...
On which note, we say thank you to our panellists, Ian Hislop and Mark Steele, Paul Merton and Phil Hammond, and I leave you with the news that on the third Sunday after Whitsun, Cornish villagers observe the traditional custom of Pratt hoisting. Britain's latest attempts to send a man into space is foiled at the last minute when John Prescott wakes up. And in London, as cameras are allowed behind the scenes on what not to wear, there's some embarrassment for Trinny and Susanna. Good night.
Can you smell the kippers? They're pretty deadly at Faulty Towers on BBC Two now. Here on BBC One, the news is next. Then it's Friday night with Jonathan Ross at 10:35.